Look, I know historically nobody likes my League of Legends videos, and League fans are probably tired of the Viktor Rework discussions too, but I don't care, I'm doing it anyway. Oh, and spoilers for Arcane, obviously.
It is peculiar how they resist change, transformation, evolution.
For the 13th anniversary of his release, League of Legends gave Viktor a visual update to match Netflix original Arcane, now available to watch on all streaming platforms named Netflix. And a lot of people who liked old Viktor did not like that he was essentially deleted and replaced with a new design that fills a completely different design trope than the mechanical enhancement-obsessed cyborg he used to be. There's solutions being thrown around, most of which are skins, which is a very clever suggestion because League can make more money off of that solution, but I kinda doubt that there will be any Viktor traditional skin that brings back his old look, because they only did those skins once back in 2013. And they didn't bring it back for Skarner, who was arguably changed just as much. If we're being honest, the actual solution has proved to be the same solution to all drama against any entity that is sufficiently large and successful: time. Most people have got tired of fighting against the rework and now just accept it, and there's a bunch of new Viktor fans who like his rework more than the old design. Personally, the only thing I dislike about the rework now is his in-game icon. Just kinda looks weird, I don't know. But there's one other major issue that time can't solve, which is that some people think he didn't change enough. Viktor mains were actually asked what the rework should change about his moveset, but since there was no expectation that his entire thematic identity would shift, and Viktor mains liked him as he was, no big changes were made. But now people are saying that keeping his moveset the same doesn't make any sense with his new design, which checks out, I guess. I mean, they changed the entire identity of Viktor's design, so it makes sense that the kit made for his previous version wouldn't match his current story. And unlike the design issue, I haven't seen any suggestions on how to fix this. Probably because Viktor mains wouldn't want Riot to delete his moveset too, but I'm cold and heartless, and it'd be fun to think about.
I like to move it, you like to... I can't move it anymore.
The main discussion I've seen about Viktor's moveset is that it worked with his old design because, as the Machine Herald, Viktor assembled random augmented parts to enhance himself, and so his kit had 4 abilities that, while all solid attacks on their own, didn't have much clear synergy. Or at least that's how people are framing it now. Personally, I think that just means he's an old champ. I mean, Tryndamyr's abilities feel equally disjointed too, but there's no story reason for that. In contrast to Tryndamyr though, I actually like Viktor's moveset, so I wouldn't necessarily want his kit to be different. Though if I'm being honest, his old kit just fit old Viktor because it was a bunch of robotics and lasers, and his new design has no reason for any of that. So hey, that still means his kit doesn't fit with his new design. However, as tempting as it is, I don't want to just treat Alien Jesus as an entirely new character separate from Cyborg Boy. This should still, in theory, be a rework of his current kit, even if it's one that Viktor mains would probably be more upset over. To me, the most iconic parts of his old kit that I kinda want to keep around are his E, and to a lesser extent his W, both of which feel very weird to use, with E having a very unique way to cast it, and W being kind of a stun that requires the enemies to not move out of it. It's weird, but while I love that Viktor's kit feels so weird to play, Viktor achieved his glorious evolution into theoretically a perfect being. He shouldn't be awkward at this point. Outside of that, compared to his old self, the Arcane Man is way more of a pacifist. Sure, he's a bit forceful in helping people, but that's the key. He wants to help people, unlike his old self who, depending on how Riot Games felt that day, was either fine with violence or actively evil. This basically means Viktor Arcane has to be a support. Changing a character's entire role in a rework has basically never happened, but the whole point of this is to fully commit to making him show accurate, and that man wouldn't be caught dead trying to catch someone dead. He's always trying to help people, but he's unintentionally changing them for the worse, which gives us an interesting angle for our support. His passive, where you get to evolve your abilities over time, will stay basically the same. Just tweak the way you get evolution stacks to include poking champions with your abilities. This would give you a way to get stacks without needing to kill minions, because as a support, you won't really be doing that too often. It would also then mirror the way you upgrade your support item, which would be nice. But besides that, there's really no reason to change it. Glorious Evolution is basically the only thing that didn't change about his character. However, there kind of wasn't a lot to work from for the full Herald of the Arcane design of Viktor in the show. He sort of just talks to Jace for a bit, uses his laser arm once, and then dies. So as part of his evolution gimmick, I decided that his base spells will take more inspiration from his earlier form as kinda just a shepherd in his commune of chill dudes. Then as you evolve the spells, they start to take on elements that fit his Herald form better, which ended up just being add a mannequin to it, but hey, that's something at least. Let's start with E, because it's basically the same spell. Now, E is definitely the most awkward ability in his current kit, but I have way too much fun with unique spell shapes, and E's cast method is just too good to get rid of. And luckily for us, the Arcane designers were forced to keep his random third arm and have it shoot lasers in the final battle. To be honest, the third arm feels like such an afterthought that I think it's only here because the League team was like, hey, we aren't changing the kit, so you have to keep the laser arm. But that lets us keep the laser arm, so I'll take it. The only change to the unevolved E is that it does less damage, but now slows by default, to shift it a bit away from DPS and more towards utility. This shift goes further with the evolved form, which still does the double wave thing, except the second wave isn't for damage anymore. After the laser, a mannequin will appear at the start of where you cast the laser and leap in the same direction the laser went. This still does a bit of damage, but its main use is that it drags enemies with it to wherever the laser ended. This lets you take advantage of that unique casting style of Viktor's E to have it drag people from far away towards you like a hook ability, or push them from close up to get off of you. And that first hit of the laser should still slow while evolved to keep people in range for the mannequin dragging them along afterwards. Next, the W is functionally similar to his current one, but also completely different. In its base form, the W would be an AoE circle that quickly drags people into the center of it and leaves them slowed for a bit, similar to one of Hui's 15 abilities. And I'll admit, this is only loosely based on his random epic Star Wars force powers that he used like twice in the show, but overall this W makes more sense when evolved. That evolved form replaces the vague force waves with a circle of mannequins that drag enemies to the center and then latch on, rooting them or maybe even stunning them. Rooting makes more sense, but stunning is a better upgrade over the unevolved version, so I don't know. It depends on overall balance, I guess. But this W and E would both work great for repositioning and locking down enemies, which could be pretty useful for a support later in the game. But it also helps you save your bot lane partner early in the game by basically forcing enemies to disengage. In fact, the idea of Viktor being a disengaged support is a pretty unique identity and lines up well with his more pacifist attitude in the show. Though it would also mean he's really only useful when his team is in a bad fight, so I'll make sure his abilities can still help in a good fight too, which luckily repositioning tools can always help with. But I think the most perfect ability for what Viktor is now is his new Q, which is an entirely new ability since his current Q doesn't really make sense for him anymore. I don't know why he's throwing a draining device at enemies to absorb their power. That's not very arcade of him. This new Q is a targeted heal, perfect for support and perfect for what he does in the show, but as a semi-human cloaked dude in his little commune, he didn't just heal them. His healing left them with permanent arcane scars and overall made them more chill. So to reflect this, it's a big heal, but it disarms the target for a short while. Disarm is a status that isn't really used often in League, but it just means that you can't use basic attacks. For mages, this downside is meaningless, but for your ADC that you're supporting in the early game, this basically means they can't do anything for a while. And that is great in my eyes. Just like his son Blitzcrank, Viktor gets one of the only abilities that debuffs you for using it, except he gets to debuff others. Would it be horribly toxic to be able to disarm your own allies? Yeah, it'd probably be worse than a Bard or Rise ult purposely screwing you over, because at least those are ultimates, But a support who thinks he's doing what's best for people but actually isn't, it's pretty fitting for Arcane Viktor, what can I say? But that's not the only way you can screw over everyone with this ability. It's a targeted ability, yes, but this target doesn't have to be an ally. You can use the downside of your Q to disarm enemies who are trying to kill someone. Of course, this means that the heal is now the downside of it, so it's best used as an excuse to get away from an enemy who you aren't intending to kill anyway, following the idea of a disengage support, although that's by no means its only use. Disarming an enemy who's horribly mispositioned won't help them survive what's coming next. Though, as I mentioned earlier, disarm is useless against mages or tanks or basically anyone who isn't a marksman. Early on in bot lane, that's fine because marksmen are all you're really dealing with as a support, but I want to make sure Q's downside can apply to more people later, so it keeps the ability to be used on both allies and enemies in different situations. Luckily, by the time you're out of laning phase, you'll probably have your Q evolved, so the evolved Q, instead of disarming a champion, will turn them into a mannequin for a short while. This mirrors the progression of the show, where he goes from healing people and just kinda scarring them with the arcane, to fully converting them into these perfect mannequins. As a mannequin, you get to run around real fast, and you can actually still use basic attacks to smack people for a bit of damage, but that's it. This also gives you a temporary health bar as the mannequin, and once all that health drains, you just go back to how you were before, turning the heal into more of a really weird shield, where you're a mannequin for the duration of the shield, even wearing off naturally with time. This is again perfect for disengaging, as it gives your allies lots of move speed to run away, or makes your enemies unable to burst you down with all of their attacks, but gives them this new health bar that basically makes attacking them worthless, though it's not exclusively for disengage, because you can use it on a teammate who wants to run into the enemies with the extra move speed, temporary extra health bar, and the fact that enemies won't know who it is until they change back, leading to a fun surprise when it's revealed that that mannequin was a Dyrus who just got into the perfect position to kill everyone. Now, to be honest, just this one ability would make a lot of people angry, just because of how much it can ruin your own teammates. And I would basically never want to play this version of Viktor with strangers on my team because I'd be so afraid of screwing up what they were trying to do. But in a 5-stack of friends, it'd be so much fun to mess with. I would play this all the time. Last, and kind of least in some ways, is the ultimate. Strangely, Viktor's Storm ultimate was both the only part of his kit to get any significant change with his rework, but is also not something he does in Arcane.
We wanted to mirror the feeling from Arcane, where he manifests a massive, growing storm that consumes everything around him.
No, he doesn't. What the fuck are you talking about? That's not what he does in Arcane.
Like, yeah, he goes up to the thing and does the thing and wow, everybody changes, but like, this growing electric storm of damage is not Arcane Viktor, and certainly doesn't work with our new pacifist support. So my idea for his new ultimate would be kind of like a zone creation ultimate of sorts, similar to Aurora's, where he just makes a circular area that looks devastated like the alternate universe Jace visited where Viktor won. This zone would essentially flatten out the map, getting rid of bushes and walls, which admittedly would be pretty complicated for the old League engine to handle, but I'm sure they could just hack something together by making anyone inside the alt area able to go through walls and have perfect vision or something. The only thing that wouldn't be flattened out by the zone is structures like towers and the border walls at the edge of the map. Anyone can freely walk in and out of Viktor's win zone, but while inside the area, enemies will be disarmed, like his Q. And also like his Q, when evolved, this changes from a disarm to turning them into a mannequin. Again, only for enemies. Although I also want to keep the part of his current evolved ult, where whenever somebody dies in the win zone, the area gets bigger. Which wraps up my Viktor moveset ideas. There's plenty of flaws here, I know. It probably would not be fun to play as Viktor with strangers because of how much he can mess up his own teammates, but I also feel like this gives him a playstyle and identity that is very definitively unique to this version of Viktor. And that's pretty impressive, all things considered, because the other major complaint with this rework was how it replaced a character archetype that doesn't exist anywhere else in League with one that does.
Viktor! 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 Viktor!
In the context of Arcane, Viktor is incredibly unique compared to the rest of the characters. A show dominated by very industrial technology suddenly has this insane-looking magical being, but in the context of League, he's a dime a dozen. Everything unique to Arcane Viktor is present in other League champions. I mean, he's literally Malzahar, a human who got corrupted by the Void, if the Arcane is the Void, and now is a wizard commanding that power. You know what? Quick fix. Keep old Viktor, but update Malzahar to be the new Viktor. Put him in Viktor's wizard cloak, make his summons more like the mannequins, make his ult him sticking out his hand to mannequinize somebody. Of course, that wouldn't be ideal either, because then Malzahar's story and personality would be erased, and like, what do you do with the other Viktor? Do you keep him as alternate universe Viktor? Do you rebrand him as an entirely new character from Zon? Do you make him Von Yip from Legends of Runeterra? You probably could. But clearly the issue is that there is no good solution here. No matter what, something's getting lost. But here's an option that's just as unlikely and insane as the Malzahar idea, but could also help fill that void of a cyborg tech wizard that the old Viktor used to be. Near the end of Arcane, Jace had evolved to reflect Viktor's old design. He has a leg brace to mirror Viktor's, he has a single pauldron to also mirror Viktor's. A bit further down that path, and Jace could have become somewhat of a replacement for the Machine Herald Viktor used to be, having mechanical parts interwoven everywhere on him. Take that Arcane Survivor skin he got, push out those Viktor bits more, and maybe even make that his new default look. It needs the animation polish anyway, and his first Arcane skin is similar enough to his current default that you wouldn't really be losing the Jace people currently like. And I'm gonna go out on a limb here and guess that there's not as many people that are a fan of pre-Arcane Jace as there were fans of pre-Arcane Viktor, so it probably would go over better too. Although, even that wouldn't really work. This isn't the same as the cyborg gloriously evolving himself. It's just a guy with machine parts, simply paying homage to a design that no longer exists in the game.
Viktor Nation, how are we feeling?
As much fun as it is just messing with various design ideas surrounding this whole Viktor rework mess, I have to acknowledge that nothing I suggested here would really solve the core issue of Viktor mains feeling like their champion was deleted from the game. I mean, if we follow through with all of my ideas, his aesthetic would be shifted over to a champion with a completely different playstyle, and his old playstyle would no longer exist. That's not exactly what people would want, and trust me, I get it. If you watched my other League-related videos, though you probably haven't, there's an old one where I talk about maining Rel. She was my favorite champ to play, but the key part of that sentence is its past tense format. A bit after that old video, Rel got a major change in her kit because it was determined that she didn't match her advertised power fantasy, which just means her gameplay didn't really match her personality or story. And yeah, in lore, Rel was a genetically modified warrior abused and forced to kill her friends. She broke out of containment and now fights against the nation that contained her. But in-game, she's a support champion whose only use was diving into the enemies and dying while her ADC hopefully killed them all because she couldn't do much on her own. So it makes sense to change her gameplay to match her story better, which is why now she's sometimes a jungler, which is the second most supportive role in the game, so it still didn't really work. But don't worry, they had to keep her at least similar enough to not upset the existing Rel mains like me, and they replaced my favorite ability in the whole game, Rel's old E, with a completely new ability that feels like it does almost nothing. I love her design. If Riot just made her kit completely new as a strong metal-bending top lane bruiser, I likely would have enjoyed playing her still, just for a completely different purpose. Instead, they took her original kit and changed just enough for me to not like it anymore, which means she's no longer fun for me, and still doesn't match the power fantasy she's supposed to. That's all to say that it isn't fun to lose the champ you play. So the fact that Viktor at least plays the same is probably a good thing for Viktor mains, but obviously never changing something at all is the best option here. Yes, if Viktor's kit changed at the same time as his visuals, it'd literally be just adding a completely new champ that's just similar enough to require deleting the old Viktor, but old Viktor fans have already lost their machine-obsessed glorious evolution, and new Viktor fans have this outdated moveset that doesn't feel anything like the Arcane Herald they were expecting. So I'd argue that if they were gonna change him this much already, making something completely new is better than only ruining half of it. Also, make Rel a top lane AP bruiser with no supportive elements and add a new separate character that has Rel's old kit, but with a design that better justifies it. Thank you, Riot Games. I'll be expecting my check in the mail right next to the restraining order.